Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Jack Hagel. It's no secret, we live in a politically divided state in particularly divisive times, and heated political discourse has become front and center for the state's elected officials. In the past week, our NC Capitol team has reported on profane voicemails left for lawmakers, rowdy town hall meetings, and even death threats against state and federal officials. WRAL state government reporter Paul Spey was at the center of that reporting, and he joins us now. Paul, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Paul, Republican leadership has told its congressional members to avoid town hall meetings. North Carolina's Chuck Edwards found out why last week. Walk us through that.
That's right. Chuck Edwards represents Western North Carolina, which is mostly Republican. It's a red area, but there's one blue dot, and that's Buncombe County, where Asheville is. And he represents that area, too, and it's where he had a town hall that, from all reports, very quickly descended into name-calling, disruptions, even people getting kicked out, banging on the door outside, overflow crowds around his motorcade. It was a chaotic scene where people came to express their frustration about a number of things, from Elon Musk and Doge's cuts to federal funding and the federal workforce, to people being scared about what will happen next, whether it's with things like Social Security or Medicare, Medicaid, things like that. People are worried, and they're taking out their frustrations with Edwards, and that's what these town halls feel like. They're not, while they're hosted by these congressmen, congresswomen, it's people are sort of flipping, turning the tables a little bit and saying, let us yell at you.
Now, this kind of thing is happening across the country. What does it say about the state of political discourse?
Well, I think the fact that Republican leadership advised its congressional members not to do this shows that they're afraid of, these viral moments where someone gets stumped and they go viral and they look stupid, or embarrassed or something like that. But also it shows that things are getting heated. Things are tense. And this is not reflected in, not only reflected in like video footage from TV stations and things like that, or from, these viral clips that are going around online. It's reflected in polling. People who are sitting at home answering questions on the phone or online about the state of political discourse. And, last year, Elon University, which is down the road here from us, put out this poll, and they found that 71% of people before the election were concerned about political violence. They thought things might turn violent. And another poll that we covered last year, the poll was actually done in 2023. It found that 23% of people think violence would be justified to meet their political goals, and that was up from 15% in 2021. So we went from about 1 out of every 10 people thinking that political violence would be justified to about 1 in every 4 in just 2 years. So that's another reason that people are just sort of avoiding this sort of thing. They're afraid that for their safety.
Now, political violence is nothing new for America. Obviously, we fought a whole civil war. Why are we seeing those numbers rise in recent years?
Well, we've had a number of things happen. Obviously, January 6th is the big one. Obviously, the death of George Floyd, prompted a lot of protests as well across the country. People taking to the streets to protest police brutality. That's again, as you mentioned, an issue that's been around a long time. Like violence in America. Police brutality has been in the news for decades now. We can go back to Los Angeles to see that. Then there was also the COVID-19 pandemic. And people are getting their news more and more from partisan echo chambers, whether it's on social media or on television, on cable news. And so people are going to places that know how to make them angry, whether it's an algorithm or a television host or a radio host or something like that. People are going somewhere looking for information, and they're finding someone or something that knows how to trigger them.
And they're making threats on these channels, and it's a lot easier to make a threat when you're behind a keyboard than when you're in front of somebody as maybe you might have done 50 years ago, right?
Oh, for sure.
And are these concerns justified? I mean, obviously there have been some recent examples, right? In addition to the Edwards thing.
Right. Well, we've seen an assassination attempt on Donald Trump before he became president last year. And so we've seen people arrested for this sort of thing. So people take them seriously, even if people think they're just spouting off from an anonymous Twitter account or whatever. The recipients are then scared. They don't know if this is someone just trying to, feel like a big man on campus online, or if it's someone who is forecasting what they're going to do. And with the bullets we've seen flying around, some of our top political leaders, they're taking it seriously.
Well, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll hear about threats being lobbed at North Carolina judges and profane voicemails for a state lawmaker. Stick around. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. We're talking with WRAL State Government reporter Paul Spey about threats of political violence in North Carolina. Paul, that recent Edwards town hall was rowdy, but there have been even more extreme examples recently. Last week, we had a string of stories about threats and vitriol aimed at state politicians. One that stood out was a story about threats to 2 judicial candidates. Tell us about that.
Right. This is in the state Supreme Court race, which we've reported a lot about. There's Republican Jefferson Griffin and Democrat Allison Riggs. And Riggs appeared to get about 700 more votes than Griffin in the election. But the race results have not been certified because Griffin is challenging the legitimacy, the eligibility of about 60,000 ballots. So that's still tied up in court. It's been in court for, 4 months now. In the meantime, people are protesting Griffin's protest. They are taking to the state capitol grounds in downtown Raleigh. They're going elsewhere to march and chant. They've put up billboards with Jefferson Griffin's face on them, and the word shame written on it. Democrats are accusing him of undermining democracy for taking up this legal battle against these 60,000 ballots. So we've talked a lot about how people are expressing their frustration, but recently Griffin put out a statement saying people have gone too far. And we learned that he's received death threats in batches and batches and batches of mail, according to his attorney, to his house, like his residence where he and his family live. And his attorney put out this statement saying, "Hey, please cut it out. Send it to his office, wherever his campaign headquarters are. I don't even know where that is, but keep your billboards, all this, we hear your right to protest, but, sending death threats to his private residence in eastern North Carolina has gone too far." And they put out this statement saying, sort of addressed at, his opponents, his political opponents, saying, if you could, now's the time to knock it out. And we learned through the process of reporting on this that he has given some of those letters over to the marshals that work for the state Supreme Court, and they investigate all security threats. And so has Riggs, the Democrat in this race. She didn't go into much detail with us about what's been said to her, but she has also handed over some of those threats.
Now, Senator Tom Tillis's office sent out a memo last week highlighting some of these themes as well. What do they have to say?
Now, Tillis is up for election in 2026. Most political analysts think it's going to be tough for him because for the party in power, that's Republicans right now, in the Senate and Congress and then the White House, the following midterms typically go poorly. The other party typically does well. Well, in this case, that would mean the Democrats might have a good shot of unseating Republican Senator Tom Tillis in 2026. So, with Trump's executive orders going around with Elon Musk and Doge cutting the federal workforce, people have been asking Senator Tillis, "Hey, will you do a town hall? Will you do a town hall? Will you answer our questions?" And complaining that his office voicemail is clogged and you can't even leave a message. He put out a memo, and it's a lengthy memo. It says, "I've been asked to do these things, but here, let me hand over a video and a letter and the voicemail so you guys can hear the types of things that I'm dealing with as a senator. And then he says, quote, after doing so, I imagine anyone with a modicum of sanity would understand that it's a silly question to ask him to do a town hall. And again, he mentioned some of the things that we did earlier in this podcast, that, it's not, newsworthy for Democrats to protest his office and things like that. What isn't newsworthy is the volume of threats and harassment directed at his staff. And he shared a letter, a handwritten letter. You can see the handwriting in the font here, of someone describing his staff as human shield, saying, hey, when people come and a potential riot, you guys are going to get caught up too, and who knows what'll happen. So Tillis he's coming across as pretty upset that people are taking it this far, and and saying, this is why I won't go do a town hall. I fear for my safety. And he mentioned that a man in 2022 and 23 were both charged after threatening to kill him and cut the hands off his staffers. So he's dealing with this as well.
Now, the Edwards example and the Tillis example, that all has to do with confronting angry constituents. You reported about a state lawmaker who's actually even avoiding elected officials. Tell us about that.
That's right. We learned recently that State Representative Aaron Pare had rejected an invitation from the town of Apex to join them for breakfast to talk about the town's policy goals for this year. The state lawmakers are all coming to Raleigh. They're starting to introduce and pass bills, and it's pretty common for towns and cities to bring their council members together and invite the local state lawmakers and say, hey, we need funding for this park or for our infrastructure or whatever it may be. Do you think you could help us out and have that discussion there? Pare has moved up the ladder very quickly in recent years. She's now a co-chair of the Appropriations Committee that controls the purse strings in North Carolina. So, she's up there. She's among the top legislators in the state, especially as a Republican, since Republicans control the General Assembly here. We learned that she rejected the invitation to the Apex Legislative Breakfast because she was sort of offended by voicemails and emails sent by an Apex Town employee. She provided us with these voicemails. They're from back in October when she was running for re-election. And in it, you can hear someone calling her names and complaining about her yard signs and just speaking very rudely to her, even mocking her. There are a couple of emails as well. One calls her an idiot. She learned somehow that they were from a person who works for the town of Apex, a town planner. And she sent all of this to the town of Apex and said, hey, I just wanted to let you know this is happening so that you can potentially do something about it. Well, in November, after the election was over, the town of Apex sent her a letter, and I'm paraphrasing everything here, that said, hey, these remarks that you've sent us do not represent our views, the views of the town of Apex. However, we found that no town rules for employees were broken. There's apparently, they say, nothing in the Apex employee handbook that says you can't call your legislator and fuss them out when you're off the clock. And Pare was surprised by that. And the Apex officials, when we reached out, were quick to point out, hey, we can't regulate speech outside of the office or outside of work. Well, the way Pare explained it was she dropped it. She forgot about this issue. She was ready to move on. She won re-election. And then here comes this email in February saying, hey, join us for breakfast. And she wondered to herself, well, is this town planner going to be at the breakfast? And she told me, do I want to go somewhere? They never apologized to me, is what she said. They sent me this statement that say that the remarks don't represent their views, but no one within the town government called to say, hey, we're really sorry about that.
So she could be walking into enemy territory, right?
Right. So she feared that she was going to go to this breakfast and someone that is employed by the town would be sitting there glaring at her and then doing who knows what. This person has left, emails and voicemails for her. So you talked about political consequences. The consequence in this case of a town employee calling and fussing her out would be Pare Perret deciding not to take up, some sort of goal or policy request from the town of Apex, which is a growing area in Wake County, very popular. They have needs. Now, Perret says she's not going to let this influence, how she votes on things related to Apex. But it just makes you wonder, if you're an Apex taxpayer, how do you feel about one of your town employees antagonizing one of the more powerful people in the state?
Now, lawmakers have taken notice of an increasing trend of attacks on local, state, and federal officials. There's a new bill in the legislature that sort of addresses this. Tell us about that.
That's right. Now, it is already a felony to threaten state officials. But what one lawmaker noticed, his name is Keith Kidwell, he's from Beaufort, he's a Republican, is that it doesn't apply to local officials. So he filed HB 95, House Bill 95, if you want to look it up, that would add local level officials like your school board members and your county commissioners to that list, so that it would be also a felony to threaten them as well. And apparently he's heard from a local commissioner there in his district who dealt with something like this. So this is what they can do to try to deal with it at the state level. So we'll see where it goes. It hasn't come up for a vote yet, but you know what? I think it will be interesting if it does make the House floor. I bet you more than one person has a story to tell.
We'll see how that gains traction in the legislature. Paul, good to be with you.
Thanks for having me.
That's WRAL state government reporter Paul Spey. For our recent stories on threats to state politicians, go to the NC Capitol section of WRAL.com. I'm Jack Hagel. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and for making us part of your morning routine. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email with Triangle news, events, and headlines to help you get ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.